Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at, well, a really critical time in American politics. Our sources are painting this picture, August 9th, 2025, describing it as intense, highly scrutinized, and filled with what they're calling an atmosphere of fear, anger, and just deep uncertainty. So we're doing a deep dive into the implications, the big ones, of what the source material describes as a second Trump administration. And really importantly, this thing called Project 2025. Our aim here is to pull up the key insights from the material we've reviewed, basically giving you a shortcut to understanding this really transformative period.
Exactly. In this deep dive, it's really about shedding light on the core dynamics. The material shows a political landscape that's increasingly shaped by ideological extremes. And this deepening factionalism is raising some serious concerns, according to the sources, about democratic values, civil liberties.
Yeah.
We're looking at how Project 2025 aims to fundamentally reshape policy. Things like immigration, healthcare, the judiciary. It sparks some really passionate debate.
And we're here to guide you through all this complexity. Think of us as helping you find the nuggets of knowledge, connect the dots, because the sources make it clear the actions taken now, well, they will undoubtedly resonate for generations to come. Okay, so let's dive right in. Project 2025, it's highlighted as this pivotal initiative. What's its core aim, really? And why all the attention?
Well, what the sources really stress is that Project 2025 isn't just, a list of policies. It's more like a comprehensive blueprint.
Yeah.
The goal is to fundamentally re-engineer how the U.S. federal government works. It's about realigning political priorities, centralizing executive authority. And the material points to figures like Stephen Miller having significant influence. Miller, the sources say, has been key in pushing for policies that fit this vision, emphasizing a return to certain, let's say, traditional governance ideas, but yeah, this is crucial, incorporating what the sources term a more authoritarian approach.
The authoritarian approach, that's a heavy term. What do the sources mean by that here? How exactly does this project aim to consolidate power?
Right. When the sources use authoritarian approach, they're generally describing a shift towards consolidating power in the executive branch. Often this means reducing the oversight from, say, Congress or the courts. Now, advocates, according to the sources, they argue this makes government more efficient, more accountable, through this centralized approach.
Okay.
But the critics, and the material details this, they warn it could really alter the balance of power, potentially eroding those checks and balances that are meant to prevent overreach. It's really a move towards more top-down decision-making, less collaborative.
So for you listening, it's worth thinking about what a system prioritizing quick, centralized decisions over those traditional checks might actually look like. How could that affect things day to day? Now, this is where things get, well, really interesting, according to the sources. They detail specific administration policies that have raised these concerns about authoritarianism and about human rights. Can you give us some key examples from the material?
Sure. The analyses we looked at offer some pretty concrete examples. One big area is the reported targeting of journalistic entities and the press. The administration frequently labeling outlets as fake news,
Right.
which, the sources say, creates this climate where critical reporting can feel, well, intimidated. And that risks eroding public trust, constraining press independence. That's one thing. Another is the extensive use of executive orders.
All right, so maybe just quickly, for anyone who isn't sure what's an executive order and why is using them a concern?
Good point. So executive orders are basically directives from the president. They have the force of law, but crucially, they don't need Congress to approve them. So the sources suggest that using these orders extensively for major policies, think big immigration changes or rolling back environmental rules, lets the administration bypass the usual legislative route. And the material argues that raises serious questions about checks and balances. It can lead to an imbalance of power, especially, the sources note, when combined with a willingness to disregard or challenge federal court rulings, which, they claim, undermines the rule of law itself.
And beyond these broader tools, the sources also mention a stark departure from past practices in specific areas, like immigration.
Yes, immigration is definitely highlighted. The sources point to policies like aggressive family separation protocols, strict border enforcement. The material describes these as infringing on individual rights, often prioritizing state control, national security rhetoric over humanitarian needs. It's painted as a much, much harder line than previous administrations, with really big impacts.
And tied into all this, you mentioned growing concerns about human rights abuses, especially for marginalized groups.
Absolutely. If you look at the human side, the reports detail some deeply troubling things. For instance, the treatment of immigrants at the southern border comes up repeatedly. The material talks about family separations, inadequate medical care, unhealthy living conditions in detention centers, and it emphasizes the severe physical and psychological effects, especially on children. The sources also flag a rise in systemic racism and discrimination against minority groups. They point to instances of police brutality, often captured on video.
Right, we've seen those reports.
And those incidents have really fueled movements demanding accountability and reform. The material suggests these kinds of actions create fear and can even silence dissent within communities.
So looking at these actions and agendas, the sources seem to suggest they lean more towards undermining rights than protecting them. Is that fair to say based on the material?
Based on the concerns detailed in the sources, yes, that's the strong implication.
Okay. Moving from policy to people's experiences, what does this all mean for the average American living through it? Our sources describe public sentiment as being marked by, well, fear and a lot of division.
That's right. The material indicates the overall public mood is one of apprehension, societal division. There are polls cited in the sources suggesting almost 60% of Americans feel increasingly divided along political lines.
60%, that's huge.
It is. And it apparently fuels this widespread sense of alienation, where many people feel hesitant to even talk openly about their political views. They fear backlash, misunderstanding.
Yeah.
The sources point to a few reasons. The sheer volume of misinformation spreading, the rise of more extreme ideologies, and definitely increasing polarization in media narratives, which tends to create those echo chambers we hear about.
And in that kind of charged atmosphere, the media's role becomes absolutely critical, doesn't it? What challenges do the sources say journalists are facing?
The material really digs into this. A major challenge is just the speed misinformation spreads online. It often outpaces factual reporting, apparently, making it incredibly hard for journalists to be accurate and fast.
Sort of balancing act.
Exactly. Then there's the issue of sensationalism. In this competitive 2047 news environment, there's a risk, the sources say, of prioritizing sensational stories over substantive analysis, just to get eyeballs. And that can lead to misinterpreting policies, like those in Project 2025, and it chips away at public trust. But despite all that, the sources strongly emphasize the media's vital role, holding officials accountable, questioning narratives, fostering an informed public character. It's crucial.
So in this kind of environment, with information being so fragmented, maybe even distorted, how do you, the listener, make sure you're getting a balanced view? It's definitely something we all need to think about. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about the counterforces. Project 2025's implementation, the sources say, has led to significant legal challenges and also sparked some strong resistance movements. What's the story on the legal side?
Yeah, the material shows a definite surge in legal battles. Numerous significant court cases have emerged. They're directly challenging these new policies. Judges are having to interpret their constitutionality, and often, the sources say, they're citing concerns about government overreach, civil liberties.
So the courts are pushing back.
In many instances, yes. It's described as a real legal chess match. And it's not just federal courts. State legislatures are active too, introducing bills to either support federal actions or sometimes to counteract them. This creates what the sources call a patchwork of laws across the country.
Complex.
Very. And it leads to these landmark cases that work their way up. Legal advocacy groups are painted as playing a really pivotal role here, leading many of these challenges.
And there's the response from society, the resistance movements you mentioned.
Right. These movements, grassroots groups, labor unions, civil rights organizations, they're mobilizing pretty significantly, according to the sources, trying to preserve democratic norms. And they're using a mix of strategies. Social media is huge, obviously, for organizing protests, spreading information, raising awareness almost instantly. It allows for real-time communication, coordination like never before. But they're also using traditional methods, peaceful protests, lobbying, building strategic partnerships.
But are they facing pushback themselves?
Oh, definitely. The sources acknowledge the administration has made efforts to suppress dissent, things like increased surveillance, disinformation campaigns, and legal repercussions for activists.
Wow.
But the material also consistently highlights the resilience displayed by these groups. They keep pushing back despite the challenges.
So this tension, this dynamic between centralized power and organized resistance, how did the sources suggest this ongoing struggle might actually shape America's future?
That's really the million-dollar question posed by the material.
So looking ahead then, With these big political shifts like Project 2025 really taking hold, what kind of future scenarios does the source material suggest might play out if these trends continue?
Well, the sources sketch out a few possibilities. None are set in stone, of course,
Yeah.
but they're based on current trends.
Mm.
One scenario involves the ongoing erosion of bipartisan collaboration. If parties just dig in deeper, you could see continued legislative gridlock, which could fuel public disillusionment, maybe even spark bigger civic movements demanding change.
Okay.
Another possibility discussed is a further rise in populism,
Mm-hmm.
potentially driven by increasing economic inequality,
Mm-hmm.
social unrest. And the sources worry this could pave the way for leaders who prioritize their own interests over democratic principles.
Hmm.
And then there's technology, social media, digital platforms. The sources see them as a double-edged sword. They can facilitate informed discussion, but they can also deepen divisions. Depends how they're used, how they're regulated.
But ultimately, the sources seem to come back to the idea that the future really hinges on the collective actions of citizens.
That's a consistent thread, yes. It emphasizes agency.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, it's pretty clear we've journeyed through an intense, really pivotal political landscape. The sources show how Project 2025 and everything connected to it is fundamentally reshaping the U.S. governance, society, the works.
Absolutely. And understanding these complex links between policy shifts, human rights impacts, public feeling, and these resistance movements, it's really crucial if you want to navigate this environment. The material constantly reminds us, yes, the challenges are huge, but the path towards, restoring balance, fostering a vibrant democracy, it's still seen as within reach. But it's contingent on active involvement from everyone.
So here's a final thought for you to take away, building on what we've discussed. Given this landscape, these potential futures, what specific actions or maybe shifts in how we talk to each other do you think are most critical, most crucial for mending these frayed edges in American society and for safeguarding those democratic principles? Something to think about.